death.
Ladies and gentlemen, are we live? Today, Wanderer-Fehn and I are going to bring you an interesting little creepypasta called The Devil Game. Now, I shall begin by saying, pray, for devils have no reason. Satan waits to curse your ways. Have you ever seen it in his eyes in the sunset? Have you ever wondered if he's laughing when he plays? That is by Kansas, apparently. And what I will be giving you now is a set of instructions for how to speak with the devil.
Which, as those of you with any sort of brains at all might know, is a patiently moronic proposition in the face of it, one likely to cumulate any number of thoroughly unpleasant fates. Honestly, it would probably be smarter to publish your credit card number to Facebook or take up a career in crocodile wrestling.
But the both of us know that isn't going to stop you, is it? The fact that it's a dangerous ritual. So, if you are sincerely interested, then we shall teach you a way where, if you do everything just right, there's a fair chance you will walk away scot-free. And of course, the fact that you might gain knowledge, and other things amongst that, seems to be reason enough for some people to decide that this is a good idea. Now, if you are the fate-tempting, thrill-seeking, scare junkie type, or perhaps the desperate sort, then Wanderer-Fehn will tell you more.
Which brings me to a point of clarification I ought to make. This is not a manual for making any sort of Faustian bargain, the whole sell your soul type of deal. Although, if you happen to bring it up in conversation, he certainly wouldn't be one to refuse. Following through with the foolhardy bargain, however, which would necessitate removing some of the protections which you will put in place for your conversation, and I don't think I need to spell out for you why that would be a bad idea. If you're really mathematically impaired enough to want to trade something that will last an infinite number of years for something that might last 90 tops, there are plenty of other rituals out there for you to follow. This one, if performed correctly, should only allow the two of you to talk.
Now, this begs the question of why exactly you would want to speak with the devil in the first place. Now, maybe some of you just like the idea of making small talk with extremely dangerous occult entities, but for the sake of the human race, I hope most of you aren't quite that stupid. The short answer is, the devil knows things that some of you may have a deep, vested interest in finding out. I mean, he's not exactly omniscient or anything, much as he might like to pretend otherwise. He's not God, but he's definitely got a supernatural advantage over the kind of knowledge any human would be able to obtain. For example, he probably wouldn't be able to predict when the next world war will happen, or tell you the cure for cancer, but he could very well be able to predict the winning numbers of tomorrow's $500 million Powerball draw, or tell you what deadly undiagnosed condition might be affecting your loved ones. Or perhaps if you have a lover whose activities you are keen to know, he will be able to hear the whispers of the spirit world and tell you exactly who they're doing behind your back. Now then, Wanderer-Fehn, please continue.
Of course, the Prince of Darkness doesn't just go around giving out winning lottery numbers to anyone who asks, and trusting any sort of information obtained from a being commonly described as the father of all lies is liable to land you in a worse situation you were in than when you started. However, if you're really dead set on finding something out, and you've exhausted all other options, there is a way to try and get accurate information out of the guy.
You see, like many of the more popular villains in anime or video games and such, the devil has a taste for games and gambling. Now, the reason he likes them so much is that he almost always wins. I did say he's not omniscient, but trust me, predicting the actions of a mortal, that's quite easy. Now, unless you happen to be a fiddler named Johnny, or you're represented by Daniel Webster, and I have no idea who these people are, you're probably going to get your ass handed to you. But if you're determined enough to want to face the risks and the long odds, there's a certain game the two of you can play to try and win the information you need. Now, first things first, we'll have to start off with a description of the summoning process and then get into the rules of the game, some tips for how to play, and finally, of course, the inevitable litany of arcane shit that might go horribly wrong. Wanderer-Fehn, would you like to take the next part?
In order to contact your conversational partner, you'll need to go to a church at midnight. It doesn't matter what kind of church, large, small, old, new, liberal, or conservative, just as long as you're sure it will be entirely empty. The last thing you want is for some preacher to walk in on you while you're in the middle of this, for the sake of the preacher's well-being as well as your own. The process will probably work best if you try it on a new moon, or full moon, or Friday the 13th, Halloween. The actual day is less important than the psychological effect it has on you. As long as you don't try it on Christmas Eve or something stupid like that, you should be fine.
What is important, though, is the time at which you start the ritual. You don't have to start or end your ritual at exactly 12 AM Greenwich Atomic Time or anything like that, but as a general rule of thumb, you ought to show up a bit before midnight and have everything set up by no later than 10 or 15 minutes after. Show up a lot before midnight and you don't know how you're going to get in. Show up a lot before midnight if you do not know how you're going to get into the church. Shockingly enough, most houses of God do tend to lock their doors at night, at least if there's no one there to watch over them. And remember, we want an empty space. Do you understand me, Wanderer-Fehn?
There are, of course, certain things you need to bring, and certain things you can't bring. For this ritual, you will need a full can of salt. You won't need to use all of it, but it's always better to have more than less than you need. 7 candles, red or white being preferable. Something to light the candles with. You would be shocked how often people forget this. Occult ritual or not, they aren't going to magically light themselves. A length of red string, rope, yarn, or thread. A full floor or wall mirror. Ideally, you want for one of these already present in the church. They're a bit unwieldy to be lugging around with you during a break-in. However, if there really aren't any there, you'll have to bring your own. You might also find it useful to bring some markers, pencils, paper, a flashlight, and any sort of tools that might be necessary to secure your entrance into the church.
And ladies and gentlemen, let me do say that if the candles do magically light themselves, you are probably fucked, so please do get out of there. Now, do note that you will not be permitted to bring in any electronic or timekeeping devices. This includes all cell phones, smartphones, tablets, e-readers, MP3 players, PDAs, calculators, wristwatches, pocket watches, kitchen timers, hourglasses, even one of those sundials. You cannot bring in any timekeeping devices, and the reason will become obvious later. Now, if you're one of those people that has your smartphone practically wired into your brain, now don't worry. You can bring those things with you to the church as long as you leave them outside the room in which you'll be doing the ritual. Now, if you brought a flashlight, which is helpful for finding your way around without attracting unwanted attention, please leave that outside as well. You will not be able to bring any lighting devices into the room. Wanderer-Fehn?
Also, don't bring in any sort of religious paraphernalia to protect you, especially if it pertains to the Abrahamic religions. And yes, those gothy black cross earrings you're wearing are hanging right side up. They count. If you have any kind of holy symbols with you, the devil will simply refuse to show up. Don't worry, you're not going in totally unprotected. In fact, most of the supplies with you are not for any sort of devil summoning ritual, but for your own protection. Old superstitions and folk magic remedies to guard oneself from evil. From what I know of it, the effect's mostly based on the power of belief, so there are probably numerous other objects, artifacts, and procedures that would work just as well. If you'd like to risk being left helpless at the mercy of the devil in order to test that theory, feel free to experiment. However, for anyone without a psychotic death wish, I'd recommend sticking to the ritual as follows.
Now, once you are sure that you have all the right supplies with you, make your way into the church and find some place to set up. It can be anywhere from the main sanctuary where services are held to a Sunday school classroom or a walk-in supply closet, as long as you have a sufficient amount of open floor space and you're certain not to be disturbed. Now, the first thing you want to do is to set up your mirror. This is where the devil will appear when you summon him. As much As such, you shouldn't complete the summoning until you've laid down certain wards around the mirror. First, you must surround the mirror with an unbroken circle of salt. If the mirror is hanging on the wall or floor, please lay down a semicircle around it instead and make sure that the salt touches the wall at both ends. You will then wrap red string around the mirror several times. The color red, especially red string, is symbolic of protection in the folklore of many cultures or religions, and this is why red candles are also a good idea. Then tell them more about the candles.
Speaking of the candles, set them up around the outside of your circle or semicircle of salt, spaced at relatively even intervals. No, you do not have to get out measuring tape to make it exactly perfect, but do at least try to make it look as though it was set up by someone old enough to be trusted with matches. Light the candles in a clockwise fashion, being careful not to disturb the salt. If you break the circle, you'll have to start all over again. Once all the candles are lit and burning strongly, your protective wards are complete. You are now ready to proceed to the actual summoning.
Just so you know, ladies and gentlemen, you wouldn't believe how many people actually end up lighting the candles in an anti-clockwise fashion. Please do not do this, because the order has a special significance, and if you do them in the anti-clockwise fashion, that's pretty much like trying to hold a cross upside down and trying to protect yourself from a demon. That's probably not the best idea. Anyway, now to summon the devil, what you must do is get his attention and demonstrate your resolve by performing some sort of sacrilegious act within the holy space. Now, turning a crucifix or cross upside down is fairly conventional, but it is not your only option. For example, there was a kid who once fulfilled this requirement by scribbling obnoxious graffiti all over a painting of Jesus hanging in his Sunday school classroom. The nice thing about turning the cross upside down, though, is that once you've finished your encounter, assuming you survive, you can just flip it right side up again and no one will be the wiser, sidestepping the relatively minor but still irritating risk of having your Sunday school turn into a reenactment of the Spanish Inquisition for the next month and a half. Now, then, would you like to carry on and tell them what other offensive things they can do?
After you've finished doing whatever offensive things you decide on, shut all doors to the room and turn off all the lights so that the space is lit only by the candles. Face the mirror and stare deeply into it, concentrating on your desired outcome. There are no incantations, no arcane strings of Latin you'll have to recite. Just look into the mirror and wish as hard as you can for the devil to appear there. After a few moments of this, when you feel ready, close your eyes and count to 10. Then open them.
Well,
I don't think this step would be for the faint of heart.
No, it would not be. It certainly wouldn't be for me, but anyway. If all has gone correctly, you will no longer see your reflection. You will be looking at the devil, or at least looking at the way the devil has chosen to appear to you. If you happen to be one of my fans, he might appear as a very handsome Asian gentleman, or if you like Wanderer-Fehn, then he will appear as a very pretty lady with a nice voice. Now, chances are that he won't look like your conventional red-horned demon with goat legs and a pitchfork, although he might look like a Canary if you're a fan of Iron Bull from Dragon Age Inquisition. Now, there is no point in the devil scaring you off, which is why he doesn't appear as something frightening to you. He will appear as something intriguing, attractive. He wants to lure you in and make you feel safe. And to that end, he will generally take on the appearance of whatever attracts you. But most commonly, it is a fairly attractive man, probably from about, if you've seen those old 1950s movies, he's got the slick back hair, the suit and everything. You know, the square jaws, just a very, very polite, handsome gentleman. And he will generally be attractive because he's a bit vain, same as me, but you know, I can't curse you. Anyway, please do carry on, Wanderer.
The only really frightening part of him will be his eyes. No matter how hard he tries, he can't hide the sinister gleam smoldering deep within them, the malevolent amusement and hunger, like the eyes of a spider contemplating a fly struggling in its web. They're supremely confident, those eyes, confident and without pity. Don't look into them too deeply, however, or you'll begin to feel helpless and paralyzed with dread, losing your hope and your will to fight.
Now, since you'll probably just be standing there staring at him in shock for a few moments, because you most likely have expected the ritual to fail, he'll initiate the conversation by asking you what it is you desire from him. If you can gather your wits enough to string together a coherent sentence, you should respond with something like, "I wish to challenge you to a game of question and response."
Even if you don't get the words exactly right, he'll know what you mean and accept your request with a wide, predatory grin of anticipation. He's been playing this game for a long time, you see, and he's very good at it. Most humans, on the other end, are very, very bad at it. This gives him a chance to, at the very least, thoroughly mess with your mind. And most, well, will save that for the litany of things that could just go wrong. You'll have to play it very smart to avoid justifying his expectations.
Well, the general rules of the game, as I'm going to tell you, are very simple, and there are a few caveats that can make things more complicated. The devil will usually start by asking you a question. He always initiates the game, by the way. It can be anything from a piece of obscure trivia to a riddle to an extremely personal inquiry. Now don't worry, you won't immediately be plunged into hell if you get the wrong answer or anything like that. As a matter of fact, he won't tell you whether you got the answer right or wrong, and this is why it is a problem. Now, after you've answered his question, Wanderer-Fehn, do not be amused at this is serious. After you've answered his question, you will get to ask him one in return, and this is where the consequences of your response comes in. If you manage to answer his last question correctly, he will respond to your question as honestly and accurately as he is able. However, if you've answered it incorrectly, he is free to lie to you as he sees fit. Now, if you've asked him something you're better off not knowing, he'll tell you the truth about it anyway. More likely, he'll feed you the most insidious, damaging lie he can come up with, or the most insidious, damaging truth. Are you starting to see why this ritual is a problem? Either way, after he's responded, he'll ask you another question, and the process will repeat over and over until you decide to call it quits. Wanderer-Fehn, do tell them more.
Now, you may be sitting there thinking that it all sounds fairly easy to get the information you get. All you have to do is wait for a question you can answer correctly, and then take that opportunity to ask him what you really want to know, ignoring everything else he said. Well, it's not that simple. The devil will never give you an easy question, one that you can be completely sure the answer to.
He may instead give you questions that you have some vague knowledge of, that you think maybe you know the answer to, but you aren't really confident, thus forcing you to endlessly second-guess yourself, obsessing over whether or not you can trust the information that he gave you next. Perhaps you think that what he said was a lie, or you wish it was a lie. Perhaps you wish that you haven't been replaced by someone else more attractive, more beautiful, stronger than you. And you will be consumed by the doubt of that response, unable to fully convince yourself that you were wrong. Or perhaps you have to make a huge choice based on the information that he gave you. Will you truly take that pill tomorrow? Or will you put it under your tongue and pretend it won't affect you, like he told you? You see, you'll be tormented by the fear and the indecisiveness as you realize that your fate, and perhaps that of others as well, rests entirely upon whether or not you were able to correctly recall some arcane piece of trivia that you don't even remember now. And you'll never remember the exact questions the devil asked you, by the way. That would make it too easy for you to go back and check on your responses. See why this is a problem? Now, please do carry on, my dear wanderer.
Or maybe, instead of testing your knowledge, he'll ask you something personal, something even you lied to yourself about. You'll answer back to him, thinking you've gotten the question correct. No, I don't resent my sister. Yes, I would turn the money into the police, but he'll know better. He'll know better than you do that you're lying, and he'll lie to you in return. And you'll believe him. You'll believe him until you're able to no longer deceive yourself. And by then, it might be too late. Or maybe, he won't even give you a chance to get an accurate response at all. Maybe he'll just ask you endless strings of completely impossible questions, making you more and more frustrated and disheartened and as you realize you'll never be able to force him to tell you the truth. Questions like, what was the exact height of Mount Everest in centimeters in the year 1666? Or what is the airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow? Although, knowing his sense of humor, if you'd ever ask the latter, he might consider African or European a correct response.
His humor is one way you can get through to him, but again, you will never know whether or not he's really answering your question, which is a problem. But anyway, there are a couple of ways to short-circuit this particular strategy, however. Additional rules and courses of action that will make the game more interesting and prevent you from being stonewalled completely, although in all honesty, he probably wants for you to try one of these options, and remember, humans have been trying them for centuries. Now, the first option is to ask him a riddle instead of a question. If you somehow manage to stump him and he answers the riddle wrong or gives up, he'll be obligated to give you a truthful response to your next question. And please, dear God, don't ask him that stupid one from Extreme Ghostbusters, was it? What walks on 3 legs in the morning, 2 legs in the afternoon, 4 legs in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, and 3 at night. And if he says the dancing bear, please don't believe him, because everyone's heard that stupid ass joke. Anyway, if he answers the riddle correctly, once again, don't worry, he won't pounce on you like the Sphinx or drag you down to hell. What will happen is that he gets a pass, allowing him to lie in response to one question he would otherwise be obligated to answer truthfully. See why that's a problem? And if he gets a pass, you may as well just give up and quit the game right there, because it's pretty much impossible to determine when he's telling you the truth under the best of conditions. Now, you will never be able to figure out when he's used that pass, because he doesn't have to tell you, oh, I used my pass. No, he doesn't. He can simply use it. And that just adds another layer of complexity that you probably don't have any chance of figuring out unless you are Korean. Now, you know what? Just forget it. Wanderer-Fehn, please read the second option.
The second option is for you to take a dare from him. If you accept it and vow to follow through, then once again he'll have to answer your next question truthfully. If you choose instead to reject it, he'll get another pass. Now, before you freak out and reject the whole idea completely, you should know that he won't ask you to do anything overly dramatic or unspeakably evil, like blow up a hospital or murder somebody. As a rule of thumb, most dares won't involve a direct loss of life or any major felonies. However, they certainly won't be easy. Inflicting severe pain upon yourself, doing something that otherwise terrifies you out of your mind, cutting off a treasured relationship, publicly humiliating yourself or someone you love. All of these things and more, things you might not even be able to imagine, are completely on the table. If you're willing to go that far, to put yourself in that kind of position, you'll get your answer. However, if he manages to come up with the one thing you know that you simply can't or won't, which he probably will as he is the devil, well, then once again you might as just well quit.
And one last thing I might add, don't think you can just tell him you're going to do something and then not do it. If you accept a dare and don't follow through with it, well, there will be consequences. Now, let me just say that this is probably the part where you actually do get dragged down to hell, so suck it up and keep your promise, no matter what it was. Trust me, you're better off that way. But let me qualify that by saying, I would not be able to do this ritual now, because imagine if he said, fine, I will accept your dare. I dare you never to talk to Wanderer-Fehn ever again. I'd just be like, yeah, fuck it. Just take my soul. Take my soul. It's yours. I ain't doing that. So, now, when you've gotten the information you've wanted, or perhaps you've given up completely, you may end the ritual by simply thanking the devil for accepting your request, bowing politely at the waist, and bidding him farewell. Now the surface of the mirror will seem to swim and flicker for a moment, and then you'll be looking at your own reflection again. Now only when you're absolutely certain that you're looking into your own 2 eyes again, may you turn away from the mirror, flick the lights back on, and begin dismantling your protections. Let me tell you, your reflection can swim back, but oh look, the eyes aren't right. But I turned away already. Turn off the lights and you're dead. Now, This is important because even if you haven't gotten the information you wanted, you must end the ritual in this manner before 66 minutes have elapsed. Technically, you have 66 minutes and 6 seconds, but really you don't want to cut it that close. And believe me, you do not have a timekeeping device, as I mentioned before. Do you see why he doesn't let you bring it in? You have to get used to 60 minutes in your head before trying this ritual. Now, if you do not keep to this time limit, well, bad shit will happen. Wanderer-Fehn, would you like to give them some tips on how to play this dangerous game?
Be very careful what sort of personal information you give out. Try not to talk about yourself, especially your emotions and problems, any more than absolutely necessary. This guy knows human psychology like the back of his hand. He's been studying us for so many years, and he will get inside of your head. It's like talking to Hannibal Lecter. Give him enough to work with, and even if you don't believe a single word he says, he'll still find ways to mess with your mind like nobody's business. If anything he asks makes you even remotely uncomfortable, do not hesitate to lie through your teeth. There will still be plenty of other questions.
On a similar note, try to keep the game on track and moving briskly. Unstructured interactions of any kind are to be avoided, so, you know, in the middle of it, don't start singing something like, "If I got locked away." Yeah, seriously, don't do any of that kind of shit. I'm making it humorous, but the moment you start talking, okay, I'm dead serious about this, the moment you start talking about something that's not to do with the game, he will use that against you, and he is very good at that. Now, he will try to draw you off tangent at some point, discuss something that fascinates you, maybe the latest game that you're playing. He's got a secret on it. He knows how you can min-max your character, and I would fall for that. I'm the kind of guy that would fall for that. So, not talking from personal experience, okay, but that is the kind of thing he will do. He will basically find a way to waste time. And it also gives him a way to mess with your mind, especially if you're gullible. Okay. Then?
If you choose to give him a riddle, use one you've made up yourself. If your riddle has ever been written down anywhere at all, however, from the pages of The Hobbit to some long-lost tome of ancient magic, he will already know the answer. That being said, it has to be a legitimate riddle, with an answer that makes logical sense from some angle. You can't just ask something like, "What's green, has 10 legs, and hops?" then claim for some inexplicable reason that the answer was marshmallows. Nor can you ask him a straight question like, "What have I got in my pocket?" He probably knows that anyway. There are no hard and fast rules to determine whether a riddle makes sense or not, but you're a responsible human being, especially if you're attending a meeting with the devil. Your ancestors ate from the tree of knowledge. Please, use common sense.
I would only recommend doing the riddle if you manage to roll the Asian class at birth, because the racial bonus to intelligence probably is very important for this step. Now, okay, I'm sorry, I have to inject a bit of humor, otherwise I'd be too uncomfortable reading this. Now, if you choose to take a dare, there is a slight chance that the devil will ask you to do something easy, like deliver a letter, for instance, or scribble a 10-digit number in a public restroom stall. If he asks you for something like this and you have a shred of common decency in you, do not accept. Chances are that he's using you to further some sinister plot, one liable to ruin a lot of lives that harm a lot of people. Who knows, maybe you're the type of person who really doesn't mind throwing an unknown number of total strangers under the bus to find out what you really want to know. But at least be aware that is what you are doing. But let me also say this. Let's say we've read a lot of creepypastas. Now there might be one where there's an unknown number in a stall. In fact, there's a creepypasta we will be reading sometime down the line that is like that. That is the kind of shit that comes from rituals like this and results in really fucked up shit happening. And just so you know, just because he's asking you to deliver a letter to some total stranger doesn't mean that's going to like somehow not affect the people you care about. It could be that the number that you scribble on that bathroom stall goes to a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend, and all of that somehow comes back to you, and one day your girlfriend's dead. That is the kind of shit that will happen, so just be aware of that. Now, last but not least, please do be very aware of the time. it might be helpful to do some practice beforehand, as I've mentioned before, and you need to get a feel for how long an hour is without a watch. The devil will probably put off discussing the things you're most keen to find out as long as he can, and when you're near the 66-minute deadline, he will start trying harder and harder to distract you. He will try to captivate you and keep you playing until it's too late. He'll string you along, give you a few glimmers of false hope, and keep you thinking that just a few more minutes, I'm almost there. Now don't fall for it. Don't go over the time limit no matter what. Then?
Now, you might be thinking that this game really doesn't sound that dangerous at all so far. Threats of psychological damage rarely seem to carry the same weight as threats of physical damage, even though their costs are often just as great, if not greater. Hate to burst your bubble, though, but the game is far from safe. There are plenty of ways for you to seriously screw yourself over, both physically and mentally, not to mention spiritually. And with these I conclude in the vain hope that they will make some sort of impression.
Would you like to tell them or sort of elaborate what kind of shit can go wrong?
First, while you are speaking with the devil, do not let him out of your sight. Keep staring into the mirror no matter what happens. He will undoubtedly try various tricks to make you look away. You will hear noises behind you, feel eyes on the back of your neck, see shadowy phantoms writhing in the depths of the mirror. A cold breath will blow upon you from behind, smelling like the crypt. A deep silence will settle, only to be interrupted by a loud smack directly behind your head, giving you about the worst jump scare you've ever had. Hell, the devil may even abandon a measure of his own dignified facade and give you a sudden jump of feigned shock, shouting loudly and pointing behind you with a very convincing look of terror on his face. Whatever he might test you with, you must not look away from him. If you look away, you will lose sight of him completely, even for 1 second. You will look back in the mirror to find him gone. Well, not gone. Out of the mirror, in the room, with you.
Oh my, oh my. Now exactly how much of your body the police will find the next morning, and what state it is in, will depend entirely upon the sort of mood he is in. Now the same thing goes if you break any of the protections you've laid down at the beginning of the ritual. For example, interrupting the circle of salt, letting the string unwind, knocking over a candle or letting one go out. Any of these things will free him from the mirror, and then, well, you're all a bunch of creative horror junkies. I'm sure you can fill in the fucking blanks. Now, on a different topic, you may reach a point in the game, probably after a series of maddeningly impossible questions, where the devil asks you a deceptively simple question. What is your full name? Wanderer-Fehn, do you think you should give him your full name?
As it is said, names are things of power. Giving anyone your full name is just as bad as giving out your social security number in the United States, posting it online. You will be lost.
I see. So as she has said, in many Wiccan religions, or in fact in many religions in general, especially those of you who are only Christian, don't know about any other religion, names are things of great power. You bind devils with their true name. Angels are the same, and none of them are named William, by the way. So the devil will of course know your name, but if you give it to him, it's like inviting a vampire into your home. Those of you familiar with ancient rituals of this know that the vampire cannot come into your house unless you let it. Do not let the devil into your house. Your name is synonymous with your soul. And basically you're giving him a symbol of yourself, because how do you relate to who you are? You are defined by the name that you give yourself. I am, well, you know my name. I am Chen. And giving him this full name is a terrible idea. Giving Wanderer-Fehn your full name is also a terrible idea. Don't do that. No, I'm kidding. But if you are foolish enough to make this mistake, then all the protections you have laid down will be for naught. He will seize upon your unwitting offer with malicious glee, and perhaps at some point in your future, you will be dragged away to hell. But at least this way, you know, the police will find a identifiable body, because your vacant shell will be totally unblemished. You'll just look like you've dropped dead from sheer terror. Then?
Last, but certainly not least, there's a matter of what happens if you go over the time limit. This is arguably the worst thing you can do. You won't think so at first. The devil will give you no indication that you have in fact exceeded the time limit, and you will conclude the ritual as if nothing had gone wrong. Perhaps, as the devil's image in the mirror trembles and gives away, you'll see a particularly nasty, triumphant smirk flash across his face. But this will be easily dismissed as your imagination. You'll turn the lights back on, gather your belongings, and go to leave the room. But when you open the door, you will see nothing.
My word.
That's right. Nothing. Just a flat, white void extending infinitely in all directions. Only the room, which was reflected by the mirror, will now exist.
Incidentally, if you turn back around to face the mirror again, you may catch a last glimpse of your own reflection. Perhaps it will even turn and favor you with a smirk and a cheeky wave, much like Captain Jack Sparrow, before sweeping out the door into a perfectly normal church hallway outside. As you may have already figured out, you yourself are no longer in the church. Your soul is now trapped in the mirror, and the devil has taken the liberty of possessing your body now that you're no longer using it. Pound on the glass and scream all you like. You never get out on your own, and no exorcist can help you. But don't worry, it's not like you're in hell, right? At least, not necessarily. See, what you have to understand is that the human soul, stripped bare of its flesh, is a deeply volatile and vulnerable thing, especially when trapped in the land of the living. You are now an entity of purely mental properties, and as such, the barriers between what is real to you and what is imaginary have been completely dissolved. As you fill that reflected room with your anger, your sorrow, your fear at being trapped, these emotions will begin to coalesce, given form by your mind. If you are not particularly imaginative, these creatures may not be too terrible, may not be able to inflict too much horror and pain. Within time, you may even be able to teach yourself to get rid of them. If, however, your mind is a mind that is haunted by monsters, a mind that is vibrantly creative and imaginative, and more twisted than normal, well, there's no telling what horrors might come clawing their way out of the maelstrom, tasting sweet release from the confines of your subconscious, hungering for your terror and suffering. They will refuse to be banished, dragging you kicking and screaming into an endless positive feedback loop of pain and fear. Wanderer-Fehn, do tell them more.
Needless to say, if you're a regular patron of websites like this, well, you're probably screwed. There's only one way to find release from the mirror and the world you've created therein, however. They say if you call to the devil once more and ask him to free you from the mirror, then he'll be willing to take you out, for the usual fee, of course. Who knows? Maybe if your imagination is twisted and powerful enough to create a personal hell that leaves you begging for the real thing, those talents might be put to good use. There are over 7 billion people in this world, after all. Even the devil himself can't be messing with all of their minds at once. Talented help is always appreciated. Of course, the corollary to you being trapped inside the mirror is that the devil now gets to do whatever he wants in your body until sunrise. At around that time, your body will mercifully drop dead from the strain of the possession. Autopsy will probably be able to identify the cause as some kind of coronary event. Don't get too relieved, though. He's perfectly capable of stirring up plenty of trouble in those few hours.
And what exactly will he do?
For instance, he may decide to do something big and dramatic, like purchasing a large meat cleaver and go on a murder spree, starting with the names in your address book and working his way out to complete strangers, if he has time. Or perhaps he'll focus on only one person, someone who trusts you completely, using your persona to get him or her alone and vulnerable. And then, well, there's no need to describe it here. Once again, I'm sure you can think of a few things. Starting to see why I called this the worst possible outcome.
we need a safety word between the two of us in case this shit ever happens, okay? So if you don't say the safety word, then I know that you've been possessed. Okay, we'll come up with one after this reading. Now, of course, there is a chance that he won't lay a finger on any of your loved ones, instead deciding to do something a little more subtle. Something a little more insidious. For example, he might drop off a few unmarked passages on certain doorsteps, or locate a particularly dusty, age-yellow text in the storeroom of your local library and intentionally misfile it in the young adult literature section. Or he will whisper 7 very choice words into the ear of a distracted-looking young redhead waiting for 3 a.m. subway train. Or maybe he'll decide that in this age of waning superstition, not enough people are getting interested in his games, and the knowledge of them is in danger of being lost. Maybe he'll decide he needs to get the word out a bit more, do a bit of networking, attract some new suckers, challengers. Maybe he'll take a quick peek at your browser history, see where the impressionable, curious minds are hanging out these days. Maybe he'll write a quick tutorial, in modern parlance, rather than some inscrutable, obsolete demonological text. He'll post it on the internet and see how many bites he gets. Well, perhaps I shouldn't have gone there. But if you've made it this far without shying, a little twist at the end isn't going to put you off, is it, dear reader? I'm sure there are plenty of intrepid adventurers out there, with burning questions you'd like answered. I'm sure you'd like to know, why is it that everyone despises you? I'm sure you'd like to know why everything in your life has been going wrong recently. And of course you're intelligent. You're so much smarter than those around you. You know the pitfalls, you know the conventions. You live and breathe for this sort of thing, don't you? There's no way you'd fall for any of the obvious traps. You're not some Dick and Jane off the street. You're not some teenager in a horror movie just looking for a quick thrill. You are intelligent. You are the one that knows religions like the back of your hand. You know the protections. One moment. There appears to be someone calling for me. Oh, excuse me. What? You want out of that mirror already? That is one hell of an imagination you've got on you. Well, perfect.